Fantasy Basel. And this is not the first time I'm giving this speech. So I gave this speech in many places. I gave it in China, I gave it in Berlin, in Beijing, in Singapore, in Seoul, in Valencia. But this time, 2024, I will modify this speech a little bit because 2024 is the advent of artificial intelligence, of KI, as we say that in German. And this is not an advertisement for AI. This is actually an exercise of trying to find out what AI can do and what, more importantly, it cannot do. When I was little, this funny guy on the left side, that's my great-grandfather. He was actually a peintre décorateur in Paris, a painted decorator in Paris 1920. And the lovely lady beside is his wife. And so on one side of my family I had artists, and on the other side I had scientists. So on my father's side it was scientists, doctors, and my father was a zoologist. On the other side it was the thing. For me, film design was interesting because it combined all of that. This horrible building here is called Gymnasium Liestal. It's an awful place, and it's the first example of brutalist architecture. So I did not fit in well. I mean, I survived. I was typus C, type C. I thought C would stand for comics. But it didn't. It stood for mathematics, in which I was very bad. So I was very lucky that I survived to go through this at all. And I spent my time making funny cartoons, and I went to the comic shop, to Fastnacht, and these were in movies. So I spent a lot of time in movies, especially in Heuberg, where I saw Alien and Blade Runner and Terry Gilliam's movies, and thought, one day, I would love to work on that, but it's impossible. Who is this? This is one of my best friends. It's Enrico Marini. He's signing his books downstairs. We are friends since he is 11 and I'm like 13 or something at that time. And he taught me a lot about how to draw comics. So it's funny that two people who came from Liestal both worked on major Batman franchises. Another interesting thing is that when I was very young, I found a picture of John Howe's Nazgul in a Bocante in some sort of fair. And I found this chair in the Art Basel somewhere in the 80s, and that was sort of the clincher for film design. There is a guy, that's what I thought, there's a guy in Chur who designed the alien, who designed the most iconic monster. And he's real, he's not far away. That's a real person. I think that was really a kick for me to understand that it is possible, that it's actually possible to do something. It's not totally out of reach. That's a little bit like if you, I don't know, if you want to be an actor and in the next house over lives Johnny Depp. And say, oh yeah, okay, that could happen, you know. So my heroes of design, but also movies I really adored, are Blade Runner and of course Alien. And these were eventually also my big heroes in design. So I was lucky enough to meet all of those people and even call some of them my friends. I drove around in them in cars. And another thing which I thought would never ever possible, when I saw Star Wars for the first time and started to just completely geek out. So when finally the ordeal of Gymnasium was over, I escaped and I went to an art school in Brussels which had actually a comic book section, and I started to do comic books. Not as good as Enrico, but I still learned it. So I started to do comics, and I learned a lot in art school. So I still can recommend to go to art school. I had anatomy, I had architecture, I learned how to even literally draw bones. So for me, I think it was an incredible school. And the problem I had, I was supposed to graduate by making a comic book because I was in the comic book section, but I made a short movie instead called Mr. Brown. And that didn't work, and I made a storyboard and an animatic and a little movie. And they said, sorry, you cannot make a little movie, you're in the comic book section. And they almost kicked me out of the school because I did the wrong thing. The upside to my little movie was that I was actually asked to work on a movie. And so I worked on 2 movies in Brussels. Both of them were never made. Both of them were my apprenticeship, mon apprentissage, as we say in French. And they all made with full traditional medium, with pencils, with markers, with everything which we used at the time. And during this time, I learned everything about movies. The horizontality of movies, the way the camera moves, the way the eye moves through the image. And I want to get to AI. All of these things AI cannot do. Midjourney can generate images, but Midjourney cannot generate actually an image flow or an intelligent content. It can't really follow a concept. This is a scene where a boy and a girl are in a tavern. The father comes in the back. He's the father of the boy. The boy is scared. She is looking over. That's the girlfriend. Yes, she's not supposed to be there either. And so this image tells a story. This image is a narrative device. It's not just an image. And I think that's what people get wrong when they see these Midjourney images. It's, oh, everybody can just click it and it just farts out content. But the content, the image, is only the vehicle. It's only what's there to open the conversation up between the director, the production designer, and the team. It's not the final product. So the stories are the most important part, and the time it takes to make this is relevant, because that's where you answer the questions. As an example, we have 2 girls back there, and we did the fashion for them. The one on the left is a fisher girl. She wears an outfit, and we decided that every 5 years they get an extra knot. So a 15-year-old has 3 knots, a baby up to 5 has 1 knot, a super old granny has like 100 knots. The person on the right is an evil character called Paul. She looks like a shark. She has a shark skin outfit. So I don't want to go forever, but it's imperative to actually understand that the principles I used to design Rax, which is this movie, are exactly the same as the principle is still used to design Guardians of the Galaxy. I brought this funny drawing, and at one point I showed it to James Cameron, and he looked at the guy with the big ears. He was just finished Terminator 2. And he looked at that guy and he said, I really like the one with the ears and the big eyes. I said, oh, why? Well, James was actually writing Avatar at that time, but nobody would have ever thought that he would like character with big eyes and big ears until they saw what he came up next. This is a pencil drawing inspired by Hugh Ferris, and I had a bit of a knack for architecture, and I think these drawings, which took about a week each, were the drawings which probably ultimately got me into the movies. So this is the portfolio which I took to Los Angeles. So I flew to Los Angeles, had this in hand. I called 1,000 people. Like, is Tim Burton here? Can I talk to Mr. Coppola? Everybody laughed a lot. They thought it's very funny. And then somebody said, and they got really upset, that I spent all my money on the ticket, and I would like to have somebody look at my portfolio. I don't care if you like it, you don't have to hire me. And the people I said that to were in a studio called Lightstorm. Lightstorm happens to be James Cameron's company. So I couldn't drive a car, so I took a bus, go to Lightstorm. There's a person there said, do you make a delivery? I said, yes. I go upstairs, it's of course myself. I show my drawings to the people at the desk, which I call like proto-hipsters, the pre-hipsters, and they sent me to Digital Domain, which was an effects house. Long story short, I ended up working at Digital Domain on Fifth Element, on this thing here. Let me start this again. Titanic, and later I got an agent and I was allowed to work on this one here. So, to be fair, I didn't do I know Kung Fu. The only thing which I didn't for the Matrix actually was the dojo. But nevertheless, you know, it is what it is. So later after that, I got hired by a company in Japan. This is Fantasy Basel, and I was allowed to work on Final Fantasy, the movie, with a company called Scheurer. And they also made the Final Fantasy 9 games. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna say Sakaguchi, and this experience working with the Japanese teams, the European teams, the Canadian teams was one of the most enriching in my life. And it also showed again this art making, this tribe which we are, if we are artists, to work together. This is what it's all about, that conversation. No way that conversation was probably as cool as working on Final Fantasy VII, which is a video game which, for those who are old enough to know, they're gonna start already excited because the music is so cute. So I want to show stuff which are very dark, but I'm also showing stuff which are very sort of sweet, because I have found out that it's great to have maybe more than one style. So I design a lot of dark things, but I'm also love to design other things. And I was very, very privileged and very happy to have the possibility to work on something like Final Fantasy 9. This is an example of a collaboration. They asked me to design something called Soul Cage. It was supposed to divide the souls of people. So I designed a harp which stands in a lake of souls. And each soul goes up the strings and plays the music of madness. Now if I tell that an American person or a writer, they would have said, okay, that's it, you're fired. The Japanese, on the other hand, they love that shit, and they built all of that. After Hawaii, they closed the studio, and my wife and I, we stayed a bit longer. I just said, I'm not gonna leave Hawaii. I love it here, and I made a portfolio, and this is the portfolio which I made, which was all the stuff I learned now, digital painting, no 3D yet, and I made a portfolio which was just mine. And for all the artists out there, I feel if you make a portfolio which expresses you and your desires, it's a much better idea than trying to make something other people did. And again, we can ask, well, can't AI just make this? To a certain extent, maybe they can, but all my images are infused with ideas, with compositions. For example, this is a triangular composition. I wanted to do almost something which looked religious, if you want to. So again, most of my images also tell a story. So this was an old portfolio, and I'm gonna go a bit fast, but for the Snyder fans, my first movie I worked on was Man of Steel, and it had a great art director, the production designer. He worked on Minority Report, and also worked on actually Matrix. People don't know that. It has all the ingredients of my portfolios. It has characters, it has creatures, it had all of that still in an analog way. But again, the art is only there to open the conversation with the director and with the production designer. And it doesn't always have to be super exaggerated. This was an image I made for Batman vs. Superman. It probably took only 1 minute to make, literally 1 minute, almost as fast as AI. So I took a backdrop and I just drew a guy which stands on a spire and said, that's Batman. And that sort of thinking, that sort of energy, that's very typical for human-made images, but not necessarily for computer-generated images. You get to design props. Props are interesting. If you make them in 3D, they can 3D print them. AI is not quite ready for that yet. It will be, but not quite. This is the Luther Tower, and I'm just trying to express these sort of designs. They can't really be so easily handed off to a machine. They have a lecture, a sense of lecture, a sense of wonder, a sense of composition and rhythm, which is unique to people. How a car moves from the back to the front is kind of obvious to us, but hard to explain to an algorithm which can't think. So this is something. So I'm going a little bit into current portfolio. This is something. So I'm going a little bit into current portfolio, and I'm gonna skip the whole Aquaman business simply because we're gonna do it tomorrow and we're not having a lot of time. But it's very pretty images. It's a movie I actually like and loved. When it came out, I thought Aquaman was the bomb. When the second one came out, not so much. But the first one was great, and it featured a lot of my stuff. Once again, in my portfolios, I tried to put my own art in. I think it's important. It's almost a hygienic sort of thing. So these are my personal things. Now we have reached a point where there's a lot of geometry in it. You see a lot of 3D. But it doesn't matter if it's 3D or 2D or pencil or marker or gouache. As long as the human factor, the human brain is actually activated, it doesn't matter which media. When the human factor is cancelled out, that's when, in my opinion, it gets difficult. So my portfolio has a lot more 3D in it now, which is of course new. You know, I only learned how to do 3D like 5 to 10 years ago, so it's kind of unique. But now the portfolio is getting more and more 3D heavy. Good for me because AI can't do 3D yet, or not well. But I have no doubt it will, don't worry. So for the people who saw Basel, I'm going to show you a little trailer, and it has some nice music too, so let's hope it works. Very mad because it uses any just, but I think it's kind of cool, especially in the trailer. This was the pitch art for a movie, and I was actually very happy. I did not work forever on that movie. We didn't have a lot of money, and the production designer, which eventually was actually the same guy which also did Batman vs Superman and Justice League, a dear friend of mine by now, Patrick Tatopoulos, which is a design legend in the world of design. He designed this, and I made the art. But I'm showing it because it is quite close. I was amazed. Patrick also drew the dragon, actually with pencil, and I was allowed to model the dragon a little. So another movie which Patrick made, which was a production designer, was Maleficent. I'm showing Maleficent because we had a problem with the creatures, and this is a fantasy, there's a lot of people with horns, so I wanted to keep it in because Angelina Jolie did not like the creatures which were designed. She wanted them from different biomes, and everything which got delivered looked very sort of like monsters. And she said, no, I want something else. So they gave me, luckily, an opportunity to design some of the characters of Maleficent, at least to have the first stab at it. So I started with making characters which have a lot more humanity in them, at least in my opinion, something where you actually find there's a soul inside of the characters. A proper soul, that's maybe another thing which I feel you don't really see in AI that much. The next step was that we had to design a castle, and I was allowed to design Aurora's castle. So I'm gonna go a bit quick, but a look like this or something which actually is more human. I think this is why those designs ultimately moved forward and not the big creatures designs. Here we have, this is actually Debbie Harry. I hope I don't get sued, but this is actually, we glued her in. Later we got actually real actors or extras and we dressed them up. So we had actually plenty of people which came and we put horns on them and outfit, and they all had to stand there in sort of a little outfit, and then they photographed them and they gave them to me and I was allowed to paint them up. This is Aurora's castle. And again, you see it's a process. It's something which went and started with this, and then ended up as this huge biological castle. And this is the set which Patrick built in Pinewood. This is the chair we painted, or I painted. This is the chair in the movie. This is a bedroom which didn't make it. And again, these are collaborations. So I'm gonna skip this, I don't have time. But this is for Nutcracker. It's sort of the same story. Yes, I can tell the computer to make a machine, a world made out of chocolate, or a world made out of something. But again, I do believe there's a humanity in a hand-painted image, just for the pure fact that it took a long time. So Black Adam is a bit the same story. This is the first one where I was really allowed to make a costume. So the thing on the left is my image, and the thing on the right is actually The Rock. And we have a few more, Hawkman, and my special favorite, Dr. Fate. I hope to see a Dr. Fate here, but I haven't seen one. But Dr. Fate was really, really cool. So we have Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate. So these were the successes of the thing. The one thing I was not successful in was actually the bad guy. I offered a bad guy up which looked totally different to the movie. So my Sabak looked like this, or after a while like that. I wanted to make a villain which still looks, or after a while like that. I wanted to make a villain which still looks which didn't look like a creature, which didn't look like a joke. I want to make a villain which is really scary. So anyways, after a lot of debates, we ended up here, and oh well, there it is. This is another exercise which is not Mid-Journey-esque. This is a backlot in Atlanta, and after 2 days of painting, I turned it into a bazaar, a backlot of Kandak. A proper Kandak. When you have a big model like this one, you have a lot of options to travel through it. You have a lot of options to actually create things. And that too, AI cannot do, because it generates all these images. When you ask to do an image from another angle, it doesn't know how. You want to design the back, it doesn't know how. Do you want to do an image where you go from inside to outside? It also doesn't know how. I don't know if you guys care, but if you work in the design industry, it really does matter. You see these figures on the left, the kings? When you have a nice 3D model, something like this can happen. In other words, they can actually print it out and make a set out of it. So they just use this as is. And here's a bit more. Again, design is a conversation between the production designer, the director, and ultimately the whole team. The image is not that important. So here's the last one. And I'm going to show you 2 little movies. So this is actually a little movie about Guardians for those who can't come tomorrow. If you do come tomorrow, I will show you all the designs which I was allowed to do for Guardians, especially what is it called, Tomorrow? I forgot. Anyways, and I also will show you some of the designs for Aquaman 2. And Aquaman 2 was actually made in full COVID, so this movie was designed completely in isolation. I remember when I did these illustrations, COVID just started, it was full lockdown. And I went a little bit overboard because I had nothing to do. I couldn't leave, so I kept on producing more and more stuff. It was interesting too because it was a direct collaboration with James Wan, which I think is a genius. Not everything works out, but I think he's actually an amazing director. So, and I also was collaborating with my longtime production designer, Bill Bresky, which I already worked on Aquaman 1 and on Jumanji and on other things. So this here we will address tomorrow. So now we're coming to the hard part, my experiments with AI. So about a year ago I was asked to experiment with AI for another festival, and I actually started to work with Midjourney. After a week or so I created all kind of things. And people say it's not so good, oh, I can't do anything. Well, it's pretty good. You know, I mean, I would be lying if I would just say it's not that great. For example, I don't know who there's an illustrator called Ernst Haeckel who made illustrations of the natural world like 100 years ago. So I combined that with a suit and ominous, or I made suits where I combined Joseph Beuys and Klimt and Giacometti and other things, and you can really make interesting things. There's two problems with it. It's unethical at this point because it's not regulated. I don't prompt my friends or other illustrators or even other artists. If I prompt something, I try to prompt something which is really, they're all dead. But even then, I think it's still unethical. It's the same like when you make a song like Ice Ice Baby, but it's actually under pressure. Under pressure was the song and somebody just ripped it. So the other problem is the sheer amount of images. After 1 week, I generated 2,000 images. Yes, there are some cool images in there, and yes, this can probably work quite well as the basis of a conversation. It does not solve design problems, but I would be lying if I would say it doesn't generate a design basis and will become very, very prevalent in our lives. But I personally have used it since I made these two little movies. So this is one. So when you see this parallaxing effect, that's actually also an AI. So the AI actually makes it look as if it's actually 3D, but it's actually not. It actually pretends to be 3D. And because I know what to prompt, because I'm an art director, because I have this education, I can also prompt things which end up looking really cool. The smarter, the more educated you are in art, the better your prompting will probably be. A lot of people just prompt cats on bicycles, you know, or something like that. So you get a lot of cats on bicycles, you get a lot of girls, you know, with very little clothes on, staring blankly into the camera. But I know a lot of architects which using a lot of AI, and I can't stop it. Even when I teach, the kids are pitching, the pitch decks are AI. So I say it's unethical, it needs to be regulated, I wish it never came. I say it's unethical, it needs to be regulated, I wish it never came. It's a bit like getting the ring in Lord of the Rings, and I wish I never got that thing. I really wish it wasn't there. So in the last year I actually alternatively learned Unreal and Blender, which are two programs which I taught myself and I got a tutor. And this is Unreal. It's an amazing tool. This is the first thing I made with Unreal. To be fair, I hired a teacher. I hired a young student to come to my house. I gave him $1,000. He had to come 5 times, 6 hours. But this is Unreal. And the difference is, do you remember the king which got built? He's there. And I'm using all my old crap in there. So I put all the models in and all that. The difference with Unreal is that you get a full model, you get a full environment. You can make rain, you can move the camera, you can move the water, you can put all this thing in. This is the opposite of Midjourney, where it's like a slot machine. So, oh, I'm playing the Midjourney roulette. What's gonna come out? This, on the other hand, is precise to the point where you go, oh my God, how does this work? And I love it. I love it. I think it's a little bit hard to use because you have to make the models and then import them into Unreal. So I also learned Blender, which I initially hated hated it. I thought it was so hard because I already knew the other programs. It was like driving on the left side or something. But ultimately I started to love it, or learn how to love it. Its frame rate is not so great, but this is one of the first movies I made with Blender. And it's kind of similar. It's not as good as Unreal, but it's good enough. And the great thing about Blender has two great advantages. It's free. That's the number one thing. It's free. You have a PC, you can learn Blender. You open YouTube. So when everybody talks about democratization and I have now my journey and I didn't go to art school, I learned nothing, but now it's democratic because I can fart out images. This is basically very democratic. So I have 3 more little movies and then I'm done. Okay, there we go. So we almost finished. Actually, I can finish in time, but I won't. So here is one more Blender thing. Again, you see, this is design. This is not just something which got generated in the most silly way, because it actually really functions as design. You will see in the end, you don't see the model. So it's actually quite fun. No, we don't. I thought we would. Anyways, here comes the last one. So I have 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. So this is the same thing. This is the last thing I did with Blender before I got ready to come here. And so I do feel that AI will be there and will be around us, but instead of artificial intelligence, I would like to get us to have artistic intelligence. That's what I would like. And I will leave you with one last thing. Please keep on drawing if you know how. And here's one. I have 1 minute, so I'm going to get to the last minute. And if all the lights go out, when the apocalypse happens and we have no more computers, if you're lucky enough, you still can sketch. So please keep on sketching, keep on drawing, keep on putting on these costumes, keep on being dreamers and make fantasy. So I leave you with this. This is my last one. If you wanna